next half hour, you'll meet a growing group of men and women that have kept their spark of creativity. Most importantly, you'll learn new ways to use your own creative talent. Welcome to Art Is. Today we're going to continue the journey with Warren Slay, a cane maker from Bay Minette, Alabama. You will meet JD Hayward, a photographer that specializes in black and white surrealistic photography from Pensacola, Florida. And we'll travel to Fairhope, Alabama to introduce you to David Barnett, a talented freelance writer and author. Award-winning photographer JD Hayward is known for a special look that is captured in his work through the use of light and shadows. Recently, he received the prestigious invitation to display his work in Tallahassee, Florida, at the Capitol. His work has also been published in Reader's Digest, Golf Digest magazine, the Miami Herald, the St. Petersburg Times, and the cover of Sail magazine.
In 1988, I really started taking my photography seriously again. I'd been shooting 35mm photography as a hobby. When I had my first studio in 1968, 69, and 70, I was shooting medium format film and doing a small amount of advertising work. In 88, I decided to, build a darkroom again. So I built a darkroom at my house and started redoing my old negatives again. And a friend of mine, Johnny Donnell in New Orleans, is a great photographer, fine art photographer. And I'm not giving a plug to any one particular paper, but he said, try this Ilford paper out. So I tried out the Ilford paper, and bingo. The snap and the contrast was wonderful, and the scale was unbelievable on the paper. So that's when I started shooting again. And it just kind of mushroomed from there. And so in 1993, I decided, I'm going to go back in the photography business full time. Everybody wants to be a fine art photographer and go out and make a lot of money immediately, and you and I both know that doesn't work. You've got to pay the bills. So I immediately started shooting weddings again, which I said I would never do again for anything. Actually, I've gotten to where I enjoy shooting weddings again. I'm fortunate enough to be able to pick and choose the weddings that I do want. But anyway, back to the black and white photography. I just kept moving on and on and on, and kept looking at some of Magritte's early work, and I have to mention Jerry Yulesman also from the University of Florida, who's very good, so I'm influenced a little bit by him. So I went ahead and I added 2 more enlargers in the darkroom, and I started playing with the multiple image prints, and basically very primitive what I started out with, but I mean by primitive I mean maybe only adding a sky to the picture and no other element. In other words, if I had a bald sky. And when I got a little bit of confidence with that, then we went a little further and a little further, and we started combining 2, 3, sometimes 4 images. As an example would be this print here. We call it, I used to call it the end of the line, but a person who bought it said this print should be called the terminus. And the way this print took shape was on a trip to a friend's farm in Alabama. I used my 4x5 view camera and did just a picture of this pecan tree, bald pecan tree in January. And the picture looked very good on its own right. But the more I looked at the print, I said it needed something else. And looking through my negative file, I had a set of railroad tracks. So I printed the railroad tracks. They happened to overlay perfectly into the print. That looked good to me. And you really can't put together a print in one printing session. So I pinned this print up on the wall and looked at it in the morning when I was drinking coffee. And a couple of days later, I said, well, the bald sky doesn't really work. So what we need is a set of dramatic clouds. So by this point, I'd accumulated a lot of cloud negatives. So the clouds were printed in. So to reiterate, what we have is, number one, the primary picture is of the lone pecan tree. Second negative added in was the railroad tracks. And then finally, the dramatic cloud formation. Again, we've used 3 enlarges to do this, and this is the effect we come up with. This picture we call Abandoned Staircase, and it was taken at Ashland Plantation, which was owned by some cousins of mine. And it's in Geismar, Louisiana, which is 15 miles south of Baton Rouge. And the house was built roughly 1840 by Duncan Kenner, built for Duncan Kenner. A fabulous plantation home, basically in a state of disrepair. This shot was taken from the floor looking up between the second and third floor. There was actually a ceiling here with a light bulb hanging down. The pretty curve of the staircase is the main emphasis in the picture. This area of the print I basically masked out in the darkroom and printed in a sky. And then lastly, thirdly, put the bird in the print, and then finally added the vines to it. I'm sorry I don't have the straight image to show you, but this has a lot more impact. The most unique thing about this picture and the most humorous thing about the picture is it shows people say, how long did I wait for this bird to fly over? And I say, all day long. This house is very close to the studio downtown. It's off Wright Street, and I never carry a camera with me in the car, but by coincidence, about 4 years ago I was driving by and I had the camera with the tripod and saw this house, and I said, the house looks like it's straight out of a Gam Wilson cartoon in the New Yorker magazine. It's a spook house, and as I told you, as a child, I always liked, spooky images. So I shot the house because I liked the peeling paint and just the light on it. Then after looking at it, the same thing. I go back to my negative file and said, the house needs a little more, the print needs something added to it. Again, we go back to my dark clouds again. So the second negative was the clouds printed in on top of it. All we had was an asphalt street down here. I said, well, I remember that I had a picture of a heron that I'd shot on Pensacola Beach early one morning. So basically, I put the water in the bottom of the picture and named the picture Ocean View. And people come by at art shows, of at least Pensacolians, who have seen this house before, and they go, JD, I remember that house, but I never remember the house being on the water. I said, it's not on the water. But this is one of the best-selling prints that I have. I get calls. People have seen this print at shows, and then they don't buy it, and then I'll get a phone call 6 months later, and they'll say, do you still have Ocean View? And I said, yes. Which brings up the point, how many prints do I do? The prints are limited to 50 in the edition. I don't like to sign and number assignment, and actually my signature's on the front of the print. I don't like to number photographs on the front. So on the inside of the print, it's signed again by me, copyrighted, and it gives you the number in the edition on the print. But this is Ocean View. People ask me all the time, they say, are you strictly a black and white photographer? And I say, no, due to the commercial practice and the advertising work that I do, that 90% of the work I do is in color. But my personal preference is black and white, and you see in black and white. You don't see in color. In color, you're looking at pigments and hues, but in black and white, you're looking at the shades, the tones, and you really see the image in black and white. The nice thing about portrait photography is people have, especially people who have a very interesting face, and they come in and they don't think that they look that good. And, I love it when they say, I've never had a good picture taken of me. And I said, let me take your picture. And when you finally talk to them for a few minutes and try to put them at ease, now there are people that you can never really put at ease and have them calm down, but I'd say 90% of the people, I can coax a look out of them. I really I would rather use the term do a character study as opposed to a portrait. A portrait would be, or take your picture would be like blip, blip. I'm not mentioning any chain outfits, but when you can pull the person's personality out of the picture, and especially get that look in the eye that's like they're looking straight, like, you want to, look through the person's soul and straight in their psyche is the way I look at it as far as getting a good portrait. And now what I like about it is, number one, is meeting the people. The fun thing is that people, when they come up to an art show and they see you and they want to pick your brain and say, what were you thinking when you did this? And these are the people who don't know that you've really got 3 negatives going, or 4 negatives, and they seem to think that you stumbled across this scene out there, which isn't the case. So that does intrigue me to get the questions that I get. It amuses me also when you get certain people who will come up to you at a show who have no idea of how multiple image printing works or surrealism, and they'll look and they'll say, "This is trick photography." Okay, fine, call it trick photography, whatever you want. But what it is, it's an image that's been created that you'll never see in the flesh, you'll never see again, and it's only in this print right here. So yeah, that's what I enjoy about this printing.